In the prior reading, Thoreau had said, "Turn the other cheek to the nipping wind." So I stopped the reading and went outside into the cold and took a jog.
Yeah, I went into the wind and turned both cheeks.
I turned both cheeks into the wind. Yes. We had read about the skunk cabbage, and we were reading the section on it's actually the visitors or the visitors to Walden and the former inhabitants and the winter visitors. So we're talking about the winter in Walden. And I had turned both cheeks to the wind. Sometimes, notwithstanding the snow, when I returned from my walk at evening, I crossed the deep tracks of a woodchopper leading from my door, and found his pile of whittlings on the hearth, and my house filled with the odor of his pipe. Or on Sunday afternoon, if I chanced to be at home, I heard the cronching of the snow, made by the step of a long-headed farmer, who was far from the woods, sought my house to have a social crack. Not crack as we know it. Crack. See, quote, C-R-A-C-K, crack. Social crack. One of the few of his vocations who are, quote, men on their farms, who donned a frock instead of a professor's gown, and is as ready to extract the moral out of church or state as to haul a load of manure from his barnyard. You know how I remember the farmers used to stand around and talk. Did your family, like, would they, they worked on the farm, but did they stand and just want to talk? I don't know the meaning of the word crack, and I don't know the meaning of crunched. Crunched. They crunched the snow. Let's see that word. Mm, mm. Cronching. C-R-O-N-C-H-ing. Crunching of the snow. I heard the crunching. Mm. If you're quietly, like, in walking in the snow in the woods, you can hear the crunching of the snow. Or if you go, like, cross-country skiing. We talked of rude and simple times when men sat about large fires in cold bracing weather with clear heads, and when other desert failed, we tried our teeth on many a nut which wise squirrels have long since abandoned, for those which have the thickest shells are commonly empty. The thick-shelled nuts, are they empty? Social crack. I guess that's just like socialize. Social crack. Hmm, hmm. This theme for our reading today is how to have a social crack. The one who came from farthest to my lodge through deepest snows and most dismal tempest was a poet, a farmer, a hunter, a soldier, a reporter, even a philosopher may be daunted, but nothing could deter a poet, for he is actuated by pure love. Who can predict his comings and goings? Did you say that about Thoreau himself? Wait a minute, is that Emerson or somebody? It's not Emerson. Emerson's not really a farmer or a hunter or a soldier or a reporter. Maybe he's a philosopher. We can predict his comings and goings. His business calls him out at all hours. Even when doctors sleep, he made that small house ring with boisterous mirth and resound with the murmur of Much sober talk, making amends then to Walden Vale for the long silences. Broadway was still and deserted in comparison. A suitable interval there were regular salutes of laughter, which might have been referred indifferently to the last uttered or the forthcoming jest. We made many a brand new theory of life. Over the thin dish of gruel, which combined the advantages of conviviality. Do you like conviviality? Conviviality with the clearheadedness which philosophy requires. You got to be clear-headed and convivial to practice philosophy. I should not forget that during my last winter at the pond, there was another welcome visitor, who at one time came from the village, through snow and rain and darkness, till he saw my lamp through the trees, and shared with me some long winter evenings. One of the last of the philosophers. Connecticut gave him to the world. He peddled first her wares, afterwards, as he declares, his brains. Who is this? These he peddles still, prompting God and disgracing man, bearing for fruit his brain only, like the nut its kernel. I think that he must be the man of the most faith of any alive. Who is this guy? Would you say it's Bronson Alcott or Emerson or somebody else? His words and attitude always suppose a better state of things than other men are acquainted with, and he be the last man to be disappointed as the ages revolve. He has no venture in the present, but though comparatively disregarded now, when his day comes, laws unsuspected by most will take effect, and masters of families and rulers will come to him for advice. How blind, quote, how blind that cannot see serenity. A true friend of man, almost the only friend of human progress, an old mortality, say rather an immortality, with unworried patience and faith, making plain the image engraven in men's body, the God of whom they are but defaced and leaning monuments. With his hospitable intellect he embraces children, beggars, insane, scholars, and entertains the thought of all, adding it commonly some breadth and elegance. I think that he should keep a caravanserai on the world's highway, where philosophers of all nations might put up, and on his sign should be printed, quote, entertainment for man, but not for his beast. Enter ye that have leisure and a quiet mind, who earnestly seek the right road. I think transcendentalism, dear, falls under idealism. Do you think? This is kind of idealistic. So transcendentalism is a bit idealistic. He is perhaps the sanest man, and has the fewest crotchets of any I chance to know. The same yesterday and tomorrow. O yore we have sauntered and talked, and effectively put the world behind us. For he was pledged to no institution in it, free-born ingenious. Whichever way we turned, it seemed that the heavens and the earth had met together, since he enhanced the beauty of the landscape. A blue-robed man, whose fittest roof is the overarching sky, which reflects his serenity. I do not see how he can ever die. Nature cannot spare him. Having each some shingles of thought well dried, we sat and whittled them, trying our knives and admiring the clear yellowish grain of the pumpkin pine. We waited so gently and reverently as we pulled together so smoothly that the fishes of thought were not scared from the stream, nor feared any angler on the bank, but came and went grandly, like the clouds which float through the western sky, and the mother-of-pearl flocks which sometimes form and dissolve there. There we worked a reviving mythology, rounding a fable here and there, and building castles in the air, for which the earth offered no worthy foundation. Do you think he is actually building transcendentalism here? In a way, building castles in the air is like formulating the philosophy of transcendentalism. This is like the section. I don't know what this all means. Great looker, great expecter, to converge with whom was a New England night's entertainment. Ah, such discourse we had, hermit and philosopher, and the old settler I have spoken of. We three, we expanded and racked my little house. I shall not dare to say how many pounds weight there was above the atmospheric pressure on every circular inch. It opened, it seemed, so that they had to be caulked with much dullness thereafter to stop the consequent leak. But I had enough of that kind of oakum already picked. There was no other with whom I had solid seasons long to be remembered at his house in the village, and who looked in upon me from time to time, but I had no more for society there. There, too, as everywhere, I sometimes expected the visitor who never comes. Do you have, like, expectations that somebody will come? I sometimes expected the visitor who never came. The Vishnu Purana says, quote, "The householder is to remain at eventide in his courtyard as long as it takes to milk a cow, or longer if he pleases to await the arrival of a guest." Unquote. I often performed this duty of hospitality, waited long enough to milk a whole herd of cows, but did not see the man approaching from the town. Sometimes you just wait to see if somebody comes. Should we have our like little hut or Walden like along like the Appalachian Trail, so we'd have a steady stream of visitors, or should we be isolated in the woods with not many visitors? We completed this section on winter visitors, but we have no idea who that mysterious visitor was, or if he was an abstract spiritual entity. Now we have winter animals. When the ponds were firmly frozen, they afforded not only new and shorter routes to many points, but new views from the surfaces of the familiar landscape around them. When I crossed one pond after it was covered with snow, though I had often paddled about and skated over it, it was so unexpectedly wide and so strange that I could think of nothing but Baffin's Bay. It says skated over. I think he actually skated. Lincoln Hills rose up around me at the extremity of a snowy plain in which I did not remember to have stood before, and the fishermen at an indeterminate distance over the ice, moving slowly about with their wolfish dogs, passed by sealers or Esquimaux in or in misty weather loomed like fabulous creatures, and I did not know whether they were giants or pygmies. I took this course when I went to lecture in Lincoln in the evening, traveling in no road or passing no house between my own hut and the lecture room. In Goose Pond, which lay in my way, a colony of muskrats dwelt and raised their cabins high above the ice, though none could be seen abroad when I crossed it. Walden being, like the rest, usually bad of snow, or with only shallow and interrupted drifts on it, was my yard where I could walk freely through when the snow was nearly 2 feet deep on a level elsewhere, and the villagers were confined to their streets. There, far from the village street, and except at very long intervals from the jingle of sleigh bells. We're reading about the jingle of sleigh bells of Walden. And I slid and skated as in a vast moose yard, well trodden, overhung by oak woods and solemn pines, bent down with snow or bristling with icicles. It's very nice to go out cross-country skiing so you can see the bristling with icicles. For sounds in winter nights and often in winter days I heard the forlorn but melodious note of a hooting owl. Indefinitely far, such a sound as the frozen earth would yield if struck with a suitable plectrum, the very lingua vernacula of Walden Wood, and quite familiar to me at last, though I never saw the bird while it was making it. I seldom opened my door in the winter evening without hearing it. Who, 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 who. So he says who, sounded sonorously in the first 3 syllables, accented somewhat, like how do, how do you do, how do, or sometimes who only. One night in the beginning of winter, before the pond froze over, about 9 o'clock, I was startled by the loud honking of a goose. Do we have honking cars in New York? Honk. Honking goose. And stepping to the door, heard the sound of their wings like a tempest in the woods as they flew over my house. They passed over the pond towards Fairhaven, seemingly deterred from settling by my light, their commodore honking all the way, with a regular beat, suddenly an unmistakable cat owl from very near me, with the most harsh and tremendous voice I have ever seen. Ever heard from my inhabitant of the woods responded at regular intervals to the goose, as if determined to expose and disgrace this intruder from Hudson's Bay by exhibiting a greater compass and volume of voice in a native boo-hoo him out of conquered horizon. What do you mean by alarming the citadel at this time of night consecrated to me? Do you think I am ever caught napping at such an hour, and that I have not got lungs and a larynx as well as yourself? Boo-hoo, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. It was one of the most thrilling discords I ever heard, and yet, if you had a discriminating ear, there were in it the elements of a concord, such as these plains never saw nor heard. We're reading about the elements of Concord, being near Concord. The boo-hoo of the owl and the honking of the geese creates an elements of the Concord. I also heard the womping of the ice in the pond, my great bedfellow in that part of Concord, as if it were restless in its bed and would fain turn over, were troubled with flatulency and bad dreams, and I was waked by the cracking of the ground by the frost, as if someone had driven a team against my door, and in the morning would find a crack in the earth a quarter of a mile long and a third of an inch wide. Sometimes I heard the foxes as they ranged over the snow crust in moonlit nights in search of a partridge or other game, barking raggedly or demonically like forest dogs, as if laboring with some anxiety or seeking expression, struggling for light or for to be dogs outright and to run freely in the streets. For if we take the ages into our account, may there not be a civilization going on among brutes as well as men? Do you think, have you ever heard a fox bark? I've never heard a fox bark. Well, I wouldn't know if it is a fox. That raises the question of foxes barking. They seem to me to be rudimental, burrowing men still standing on their defense, awaiting their transformation. Sometimes one came near to the window, attracted by my light, barked a vulpine curse at me, and then retreated. Usually the red squirrel, a Sciurus hudsaunius, waked me in the dawn, coursing over the roof and up and down the sides of the house, as if sent out of the woods for this purpose. If the course of the winter I threw out half a bushel of ears of sweet corn. In the course of the winter I threw out half a bushel of ears of sweet corn, which I had not got ripe, onto the snow crust by my door, and was amused by watching the motions of various animals which were baited by it. We could go to the woods and bait animals. In the twilight and the night, the rabbits came regularly and made a hearty meal. All day long, the red squirrels came and went and afforded me much entertainment by their maneuvers. One would approach at first warily through the scrub oaks, running over the snow crust by fits and starts like a leaf blown by the wind, now a few paces this way with wonderful speed and waste of energy, making inconceivable haste with his trotters, as if it were for a wager, and now as many paces that way, but never getting on more than half a rod at a time, and then suddenly pausing with a ludicrous expression and a gratuitous somerset, as if all the eyes in the universe were fixed on him. For all the motions of a squirrel, even in the most solitary recesses of the forest, imply spectators as much as those of a dancing girl, wasting more time and delay and circumspection than would have sufficed to walk the whole distance. I never saw one walk. He never saw a squirrel walk. Do you think squirrels scurry and run? My God, squirrels don't walk. That's kind of true, dear. You squirrels don't walk. My car says I brake for squirrels, so I don't drive if I see a squirrel. And then suddenly, before you can say Jack Robinson, he would be in the top of a young pine, pitch pine, winding up his clock and chiding all imaginary spectators, soliloquizing and talking to all the universe at the same time for no reason that I could ever detect, or he himself was aware of, I suspect. At length he would reach the corn, and selecting a suitable ear, frisk about in the same uncertain, trigonomical way to the topmost stick of my woodpile before my window, where he looked at me in the face, and there sit for hours, supplying himself with a new ear from time to time, nibbling at first voraciously, and throwing the half-naked cobs about, till at length he grew more dainty still, and played with his food, tasting only the inside of the kernel and the ear, which was held balanced over the stick by one paw, slipped from his careless grasp, and fell to the ground, when he would look over it with a ludicrous expression of certainty, as if suspecting that it
It's
had
amazing
life.
now visualize my poem about through animals that I describe
Actually,
how they eat or how they
actually, I can visualize. I've seen squirrels eating and holding nibbling their corn and staring at you.
said that who doesn't, who didn't. Today they're everywhere. But it's like I did the same thing. I wrote about
You wrote about the squirrel?
not the squirrel, animals in general, how they fought, remember?
Do you know the squirrels don't walk? Do you ever see a squirrel walk? They scurry. They scurry about. I've never seen a squirrel. They work fast. They seem very hyper. They work fast. The squirrels don't walk. We're just talking about winter animals, so if you expected some heavyweight transcendentalism or philosophy, I'm sorry. We're just talking about animals. That is transcendentalism, by the way. Tasting only the inside of the kernel of transcendentalism. We're only tasting the innermost kernel, the inside of the kernel of philosophy, and the air which was held balanced over the stick by one paw slipped from his careless grasp and fell to the ground, when he would look over at it with a ludicrous expression of uncertainty, after suspecting that it had life, but the mind not made up whether to get it again or a new one, or to be off now thinking of corn, then listening to hear what was in the wind. Do you think it's like this is about like the zen of listening to the wind? And this is in fact philosophy. Listening to the wind, so the little imprudent fellow would waste many an ear in a forenoon, till at last, seizing some longer and plumper one, considerably bigger than himself, and skillfully balancing it, he would set out with it to the woods like a tiger with a buffalo, by the same zigzag course and frequent pauses, scratching along with it as if it were too heavy for him, and falling all the while, making it fall a diagonal between a perpendicular and horizontal, being determined to put it through at any rate a singularly frivolous and whimsical fellow. And so he would get off with it to where he lived, perhaps carry it to the top of a pine tree, 40 or 50 rods distance, and I would afterwards find the cobs strewn about the woods in various directions. He made a mess. He made a mess with the corn cobs. Did you ever have corn on the with cobs? Did you have corn? But you got that from the Americans. At length the jays arrive. Those discord, now were the jays, the birds, those discord screams were heard long before, as they were warily making their approach, an eighth of a mile off, and in a stealthy and sneaking manner they flit from tree to tree, nearer and nearer and pick up the kernels. Oh, I could see that, which the squirrels had dropped. Here we could see that scenery just at the bird feeder. You have the jays coming and the squirrels coming and the squirrels climbing and the jays climbing. My goodness. This is contemporary. We're just reading what currently occurs in nature. Then, sitting on a pitch pine bough, they attempt to swallow in their haste a kernel which is too big for their throats and chokes them. And after great labor, they disgorge it and spend an hour in the endeavor to crack it by repeated blows with their bills, and they were manifestly thieves, and I had not much respect for them. But the squirrels, though at first sigh, went to work as if they were taking what was their own. Is this like he set up a camera, a motion detector camera, being himself in the woods to look at animals? Is he like a photographer
They do that.
with a motion detector camera? Him being his own eyeballs in the woods. Meanwhile also came the chickadees in flocks, which, picking up the crumbs the squirrels had dropped, chickadees now come in. So we have first squirrels and jays and chickadees, placing them under their claws, hammering away at them with their little bills, as it were an insect in the bark, till they were sufficiently seduced for their slender throats. A little flock of these tick mice came daily to pick a dinner out of my woodpile, or the crumbs at my door, with faint flitting, lisping notes like the tinkling of icicles in the grass, or else with sprightly day, or more rarely in spring-like days, a wiry, summery Phoebe from the woodside. They were so familiar that at length one alighted on an armful of wood which I was carrying in, and pecked at the sticks without fear. I once had a sparrow alight upon my shoulder for a moment while I was hoeing in a village garden. I felt that I was more distinguished by those circumstances than I should have been by any epaulet I could have worn. The squirrels also grew at last to be quite familiar, and occasionally stepped upon my shoe when that was the nearest way. When the ground was not yet quite covered, and again near the end of winter, when the snow was melted on my south hillside and about my wood pile, the partridges came out of the woods morning and evening to feed them. Whichever side you walk in the woods, the partridge burst away on wiring wings, jarring the snow from the dry leaves and twigs on high, which comes shifting down in the sunbeams like golden dust, for this brave bird is not to be scared by winter. Doesn't Buddha say you can't always be strong, but you can be brave? Do you think you can't, if you can't be strong, you can at least be brave? These brave birds is not scared by winter. It is frequently covered up by drifts, and it is said, quote, sometimes plunges from on wing into the soft snow, where it remains concealed for a day or two. I used to start them in the open land also, where they had come out of the woods at sunset to bud the wild apple trees. They will come regularly every evening to particular trees where the cunning sportsman lies in wait for them, and the distant orchards next the woods suffer thus not a little. I'm glad that the partridge gets fed at any rate. It is nature's own bird which lives on buds and diet drink. In the dark winter mornings or in short winter afternoons, I sometimes heard a pack of hounds threading all the woods with hounding cry and yelp, unable to resist the instinct of the chase, and the note of the hunting horn at intervals proving that man was in the rear. The woods ring again, and yet no fox bursts forth onto the open level of the pond, nor following pack pursuing this action. And perhaps at evening I see the hunters returning with a single brush trailing from their sleigh for a trophy, seeking their inn. They tell me that if the fox would remain in the bosom of the frozen earth, he would be safe. For if he would run in a straight line away, no foxhound could overtake him. But having left his pursuers far behind, he stops to rest and listen till they come up. And when he runs, he circles round to his old haunts where the hunters await him. Sometimes, however, he will run up on a wall many rods and then leap off far to the other side. He appears to know that water will not retain his scent. You think he knows that? A hunter told me that he once saw a fox pursued by hounds burst out onto Walden, where the ice was covered with shallow puddles, run part way across, and then return to the same shore. Ere long the hounds arrived, but here they lost the scent. Sometimes a pack hunting by themselves would pass my door and circle round my house and yelp and hound without regarding me. As if afflicted by a species of madness, so that you think these dogs go mad chasing the fox? Do you think people obsess over something and they chase after it? Like a hound chasing a fox?
Do they eat the fox, or why do they chase the fox?
They don't eat the fox, dear. They're just instinct hunting dogs. I don't know. They smell it, and they're hunting dogs. They chase their prey. You know that. They hound as if afflicted by a species of madness, so that nothing can divert them from the pursuit. Thus they circle until they fall upon the recent trail of a fox, for a wise hound will forsake everything else for this. One day a man came to a hut from Lexington to inquire after his hound that made a large track and had been hunting for a week by himself. But I fear that he was not the wiser for all I told him, for every time I attempted to answer his questions, he interrupted me by asking, quote, "What do you do here?" He had lost a dog, but found a man. It seems he lost his dog. I guess you might lose your hound dogs in the woods sometimes. They go off hunting on their own. Some dogs hunt alone, of course. Dad's dog used to hunt woodchucks. In fact, he brought them home, the prize home, and laid it in the lawn. And I have a famous photo of him staring across the field at a far distant woodchuck. I have him looking at the woodchuck. And it's a long distance off. That was my father's favorite photo. So, his dog. I don't know where the photo is. So in the end, you just have a dog staring at a woodchuck. with attention or madness, in the pursuit of the fox, the trail of a fox, for a wise hound. I fear that he was not the wiser for all I told him, but he asked, what do you do here? So what did Thoreau do in Walden? Was he being a man or a transcendentalist or a philosopher or just living or searching for himself or live deliberately or
enjoying nature?
He didn't want to wake up one day and realize he wasted his life. He wanted to live a meaningful life.
That was very beautiful.
What do you do here? What does he do? Who writes about transcendentalism? Or does he write about nature? Or write about winter animals? Or just stay warm and eat? Does he stay warm and eat? They ask what he does there. This guy came, the guy hunting his dog says, what do you do here?
Oh.
He had lost a dog but found a man. Okay, so let's see what Thoreau says. Well, he eats and he sleeps, does he not? And watches animals. Feeds corn to squirrels. One old hunter who has a dry tongue, was you used to come to bathe in Walden once every year when the winter was warmest, and at such times looked in upon me, told me that many years ago he took his gun one afternoon and went out for a cruise in Walden Wood. As he walked the wayland road, he heard the cry of hounds approaching, and ere long a fox leaped the wall into the road, and as quick as thought leaped the other wall out of the road, and his swift bullet had not touched him. Some way behind came an old hound and her 3 pups in pursuit, hunting on their own account, and disappeared again in the woods. Late in the afternoon, as he was resting in the thick woods south of Walden, he heard the voice of the hounds. Far over towards the fair haven, still pursuing the fox, and on they came, the hounding's cry, which made all the woods ring, sounding near and near, now from Well Meadow, now from Baker Farm. For a long time he stood still and listened to their sweet music. Who listened to the sweet music? He, the old hunter. He listened to the sweet music. Music so sweet. He listened to their music, so sweet to a hunter's ear, when suddenly the fox appeared, threading the solemn aisles with an easy, cursing pace, whose sound was concealed by a sympathetic rustle of the leaves, swift and still, keeping the ground, leaving his pursuers far behind. And leaping upon a rock among the woods, he sat erect and listening, with his back to the hunter. For a moment compassion restrained the latter's arm, but that was a short-lived mood, as quick as thought can follow thought. His piece was leveled, and whang! The fox, rolling over the rock, lay dead on the ground. It killed him. The hunter still kept his place and listened to the hounds. Still on they came, and now the near woods resounded through all their aisles with their demonic cry. At length the old hound burst into view, with muzzle to the ground, and snapping the air as if possessed, and ran directly to the rock, but spying the dead fox, he suddenly ceased her hounding, as if struck dumb with amazement, and walked round and round her in silence, and one by one her pups arrived, and like their mother were sobered into silence by the mystery. Then the hunter came forward and stood in their midst, and the mystery was solved. They waited in silence while he skinned the fox, and they followed the brush a while, and at length turned off into the woods again. That evening a western squire came to the conquered hunter's cottage to inquire for his hounds, and told how for a week they had been hunting on their own account from western woods. The conquered hunter told him what he knew and offered him the skin, but the other declined it and departed. He did not find his hounds that night, but the next day learned that they had crossed the river and put up at a farmhouse for the night, whence having been well fed, they took their departure early in the morning.
Probably some people would probably think he was crazy to just.
Who, Thoreau? Well, he's a writer. He's giving a story. He's just.
What do they know about writing? They only know if you have a dog in the
Here, he's writing what he observed. I mean. What? Why wouldn't you write? If you're a writer, he's just writing what he saw.
Yeah, but I mean, who will understand that?
Well, it's kind of interesting the way the dogs react, and it's just writing. He's just a writer. You ask, what do you do here? I just write about what I see. What do I do? What do you do? I just read what somebody's written. I just read what Thoreau has written. What do you do? Do you listen to what somebody has read? What somebody has written? What do you do here? You can listen to the sweet sound of the hound. We're listening. We're trying to figure out what you do, we do, what you do, what do you do while listening to this. So we read about building the castles in the air of transcendentalism, and cracking open the social crack, making social cracks. It's a brand new theory of life, which you have to have when you're clear-headed and convivial. And how to wait for a visitor who never comes. And what are the elements of concord? And squirrels don't walk, actually. We've discovered that they don't walk, which is true. And we discovered a brave bird. Well, I think the image of probably this is realist. Is it realism or idealism? I mean, the description of the squirrels was realistic, and the mice, and the jays, and the squirrels getting the corn, and him feeding the corn, and the description, I believe, of the hounds and the fox were also realistic. So is it realism or idealism or transcendentalism?
Interesting.
And what is he doing there? Is he just keeping his journal? Or?
Everything.
We discovered a man living in the woods just keeping a journal, and that's what he was doing. And that's the answer.